scary stories. This is Mr. H. You're listening to Masked Horror. The Phantom Account. Working as a teller in a small-town bank isn't as mundane as you might think. Sure, most days are filled with routine transactions and the occasional chatty customer, but every so often, something happens that sticks with you, something you can't explain. For me, it was the Phantom Account. It started innocently enough. I noticed a strange account while balancing the day's transactions. Money was being withdrawn daily, but the account holder had passed away 3 years earlier. I thought it was a glitch at first. Maybe a family member with access had forgotten to close the account, but when I brought it up to my manager, she froze. That account should have been locked, she said, her voice tight. We checked the logs. The withdrawals were happening at random times, all from the same ATM outside our branch. The problem, security footage showed no one at the machine during those times. It was eerie, watching the screen show the ATM door opening like it does when it dispenses cash, but no cash came out, and there was no one standing there using the ATM. My manager tried to freeze the account, but every time she did, the system would reboot. It wasn't just a technical issue. It felt deliberate, like the account didn't want to be closed. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Employees started hearing faint typing sounds after hours, even when no one was at the desks. I don't know if it was paranoia on our parts, but something was definitely going on. One night, I was finishing up some paperwork when I saw a movement in the corner of my eye. A hunched figure sat at the desk in the back office. At first, I thought it was one of the managers, but when I called out, no one answered. I walked over, my heart pounding, but the chair was empty. The final straw came when we dug deeper into the account's history. The name on the account belonged to a former bank employee, someone who had been fired under suspicious circumstances years before I started working there. Rumor had it he'd been caught embezzling, but he died in a car crash before he could face charges. The account became my personal nightmare. Every time it popped up on my screen, I quickly moved to the next one, refusing to even look at it. One night, while closing up, I accidentally clicked on it. A chill ran down my spine as I saw the balance, 0. But then, before my eyes, the balance changed. Numbers began filling in, one by one, until the total reached the exact amount I had in my savings. I slammed my computer shut and reported it, but no one took me seriously. I quit not long after that. The wrong deposit. After my Friday night shift as a bar manager, I did what I always did. I gathered the night's earnings. It had been a busy evening, with crowds rolling in for happy hour and payday drinks. By the time we closed, it was early Saturday morning. The bills were neatly bundled, crisp, and fresh from the register, and I packed them into a deposit bag. Routine, right? Just another late-night trip to the bank. The streets were quiet as I pulled into the 24-hour drop-off lane. The fluorescent lights outside the bank hummed faintly, casting eerie shadows on the empty sidewalk. I slid my key into the deposit box and fed the bag inside. A small sense of relief washed over me. The night's work was safe. As I drove home, I didn't think twice about it. By Monday, though, everything had unraveled. My boss called me into the office, his face tight with suspicion. The deposit didn't go through, he said flatly. Confused, I insisted I'd dropped it off like I always did. Together, we went to the bank to clear things up. The bank manager pulled out the deposit bag and opened it right in front of us. My stomach turned when I saw what was inside. No crisp bundles of cash, just rotting, moldy newspapers, damp and reeking like something pulled from an old basement. I stammered, my throat dry. That's not what I put in there. The bank manager frowned. "Let's check the footage." We huddled around the small monitor as the grainy security footage played. There I was, approaching the deposit box, the bag in hand. I dropped it inside, just as I remembered. But then the screen flickered, just for a split second. When the feed resumed, the bag I had placed in the box was gone. The footage showed nothing unusual, no one tampering with the box, just emptiness. It didn't matter what I said, my boss didn't believe me. He was furious, accusing me of stealing the money and trying to cover it up. No matter how much I protested, the evidence, or lack of it, was against me. He fired me that week. The worst part, the police weren't much help either. They ruled it a mishandling or possibly a technical error. But the fear started creeping in when I learned this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. A year earlier, another bar in the area reported their deposit missing under almost identical circumstances. Same bank, same deposit box. I tried to move on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I tried to get a new job quickly, but was unable to get one as a bar manager, as the bar and restaurant community is large but small at the same time. I became depressed due to the lack of job prospects, and the dreams were the worst. I'd see myself at the bank, standing at the deposit box, but every time I opened it, there was a face staring back at me. I don't know where that money went, but I know one thing for sure. I'll never use the deposit box again, or I will have someone else deposit the money for me while I go with them to the bank. I just wish for all that I went through, I would have taken the money. At least it would have been worth the trouble. The vanishing customer. Working as a loan officer in a small suburban bank, I've dealt with my share of strange customers, but none have ever chilled me like the woman who came in that one afternoon. It was a normal day, lines of people, phones ringing, the hum of the printers. That's when she walked in. She was petite, wearing a faded gray dress that looked oddly out of fashion, like something from a thrift store or an old photograph. She clutched a thick folder, her knuckles white, as if she were holding onto it for dear life. "Hi," I said, her voice soft but urgent. "I need a loan. I've brought all the documents." She slid the folder onto my desk. I started asking the usual questions: income, credit history, what the loan was for. She was vague, almost cryptic, and kept repeating, "I don't have much time." Her hands trembled, and her eyes darted towards the clock on the wall every few seconds. I remember asking if everything was okay, but she brushed me off, saying it was a matter of life and death. From my many years of experience, it always is. At that point, I figured she was in some kind of trouble. I told her I'd grab the necessary forms to get the process started. I turned to reach for the drawer behind me, and when I looked back, she was gone. Her folder was gone too. At first, I thought she left in a hurry. Maybe she panicked or changed her mind. I asked the other staff if they had seen her leave, but no one had. She was there for one moment, and then she wasn't. That's when things got strange. I felt a cold sweat prickling my skin. I checked every camera angle in the bank. There was no sign of her leaving. Later that day, a coworker overheard me talking about the incident and froze. She told me about a woman who had come to the same branch decades earlier, desperate for a loan to save her house. She was denied, and a few weeks later, she was found in her home, dead from what authorities ruled as self-inflicted tragedy. No one knew the exact details. A sudden wave of coldness swept over my body. The description of the woman matched exactly, down to the gray dress. I don't work at that bank anymore, but I still think about her. I wonder if she's trapped somehow, replaying her desperation over and over, hoping for a different outcome. But from the friends I still have at that bank, they haven't seen her since. The cursed safety deposit box. I was working as a new loan officer when the trouble began. It started quietly, whispers among employees about that box. A man had rented it years ago to store a family heirloom, a locket he claimed had been passed down for generations. At first, I didn't think much of it. People keep all kinds of things in safety deposit boxes. But then the story started. Employees would come back pale after escorting customers into the vault. They'd complain about an unbearable chill near the man's box, like standing in a freezer. Some said they felt nauseous or an inexplicable sense of sadness. One teller even broke down crying during her shift, muttering that she could hear someone sobbing when she opened the vault. I avoided the vault whenever I could. If someone needed access to a safety deposit box, I'd conveniently find something else to do and ask a colleague to assist. I didn't want to admit it out loud, but even walking past that part of the bank gave me goosebumps. One day, the man who rented the box came in. He was older now, looking worn down and gaunt, as if he hadn't slept in weeks. He told us he wanted to retrieve the locket. I remember the way his hands shook as he signed the paperwork. A colleague escorted him to the vault while I stayed behind, thankful to avoid it. Minutes later, the man stormed out of the vault, his face in shock. "It's gone," he said, his voice trembling. "The locket, it's gone." We checked the logs. No one else had accessed the box. The security footage showed nothing unusual, just the man unlocking his box, staring inside, and then stumbling back, horrified. The box itself was completely empty. That night, things got worse. The vault alarm went off, and when security arrived, they found nothing. But the next morning, employees started hearing faint sobbing from the vault, even when it was empty. One teller swore she saw a shadowy figure lingering near the safety deposit boxes, though it disappeared when she turned the lights on. Digging into the locket's history, we found something chilling. It had belonged to a woman accused of witchcraft in the 1700s. Legend said she had cursed the locket, vowing vengeance on anyone who tried to profit from it or lock it away. The man who rented the box vanished soon after. His car was found abandoned in the bank's parking lot, the doors unlocked and the keys still inside. No one has seen or heard from him since. I no longer work at the bank. I couldn't handle the growing unease, the whispers of things I couldn't explain. And every so often, when I pass by the bank on my way home, I catch a fleeting glimpse of a shadowy figure in the window, standing perfectly still, as if it knows I'm there, as if it's waiting for me to return.